Hello and welcome to another GemCap Academy Fireside Chat. And once again, it is my pleasure to welcome Attilio Veneziano from Miami. Good afternoon to you. How are you?
Hi, Stuart. Glad to be here and glad to see that you are one of the few who can pronounce my surname correctly. That's good.
Well, thankfully, it's written behind you, so I was literally phonetically looking at it. So, in my defense on that one. Now, you're coming over to the UK and Ireland later on this month, but ahead of that, I wanted to talk about a topic which is quite relevant at the moment because a lot of people are talking about it. It's literally every day there's something comes out, and that's the overseas operator enrollment. A lot of people talk about the OFR and the temporary permissions regime coming to an end. And this is basically all about fund managers promoting into the UK from overseas and offshore markets. One of those areas, quite simply, is equivalence. I mean, the equivalence of everyone's been worried about post-Brexit. We in the UK have been concerned about whether or not we'd actually get equivalence with the European authorities. I tell you, what do we mean by equivalence in this context?
Yeah, I think that the irony is that the European Union was dangling equivalence in front of the UK, right? And then the script was flipped, and the UK deemed the member state of Europe and of the Union and the economic area as equivalent, right? I think that doesn't mean a free pass for European fund managers to Europe, by no means. It's an opening of the UK retail fund markets, again, for European managers and their usage, but that is under the rules of the UK. So the UK is not giving up its sovereignty in supervising its market, and will be doing it at its own with its own rules. And this is where the challenge starts for all the managers that were used to the passport, which was a much simpler way to access this market, if you like.
Well, as someone who's a great believer in the European entity, looking at equivalence is great. And as long as it works out, the first part of that really is the offshore fund regime and the recognition under that and the UK basically recognizing of offshore funds. What are the timelines we're talking about, and also what does it actually mean, and what do fund managers need to look at when it comes to getting recognition under the UKFR?
So basically, today is we are nearing the end of September, which is let's say the starting point for all the new managers which didn't market under the temporary marketing permission regime. And then, as you know, there are slots that have been assigned by the FCA for the conversion, and that's based on alphabetical order, right? In reality, I see that many people have been downplaying this exercise. Partly because it's new, and also because there is a bias probably with other countries like Switzerland, where things seems to follow a specific procedure, but not being as demanding. I think that there is a first blind spot, if you like, in the fact that the FCA wants to do this process in an electronic manner, right? So you have to enroll on their Connect platform, make sure that if you are a management company, you assign the user access to the various managers, if that's how you want to do it. The reality is that the FCA wants to become one of these data-led supervisors, right? And so we don't know what they will do with this data and how they will use it, but they are asking for many things that were not a concern at the time of the passport, right? And one of the things that I wanted to discuss with you was this issue of the cost and fees, right? So it's like there are specific data points related to the cost of the shared class.
Is this when the submissions are going in? You need to make sure that your costs are there and they're fair and transparent. Is that what we're referring to? Or is this part of that your assessment of value or your value assessment? Or is this something totally different?
Yeah, no, it's related because basically, as you know better than me, in the UK there is this assessment of value, right? And so when a fund gets authorized, a UK fund, they have to give this information on how on their pricing structure for the FCA to assess whether it's fair and there is value for consumers. Similar entry points and data points are required for all these European funds that want to access the UK market. And so the question is, what is the FCA going to do with this data, right? So we don't have examples as of yet, but I am one who believes that if they're asking for this data, they might want to do something about it. And probably they will be able to spot these outliers and challenge them if their price is not in line with a peer group or with some, standards in the market. So I do think that this is not something that is still rule of law in Europe, but it was, as you know better than me, in the UK. And this is likely one of the blind spots that not everyone is, of course, looking at.
Right. Okay. I mean, it's interesting you talk about the costs and fees of a fund, because as long as the regulator is looking and comparing apples with apples and pears with pears, because what we don't want to see is, oh, this fund is more expensive than that fund, when actually it's a completely different asset class. Well, maybe not an asset class, but be a geographical issue. Like this fund's got 80% in Nigeria, where custody fees are way up high, whereas this one's 100% UK or US, where the custody fees are way down. They've got to take into account. But I think the challenge has got to be there. And I think historically, and we've talked about this before we started recording, which is the onus is really not just on the fund manager and on behalf of the investors, because that's basically what a fund manager should be doing, but it's also on the fund board. And the fund board are an independent body. They should be an independent body. They should be challenging fund managers before it even gets anywhere close to the regulator. So hopefully fund managers who are listening to this will look at themselves and say, can we sell a product at this price in that particular market? Not because from a commercial point of view, but from an investor's point of view. And that's probably the most important thing, that if the regulator, the UK FCA, has actually taken into account, which is firms who are coming into market have got to be competitive, they've got to be commercial as well. That's really, really important. Just moving on slightly, if we may, the financial promotions, a subject dear to our heart because we do this. Financial promotions covers fact sheets, decks, webinars, seminars, you name it, anything where there's marketing material or marketing content going to a consumer. Now, under the rules currently, all of that financial promotion material needs to be signed off by a regulated entity in the UK. So if you're a US or a European-based manager, you need to have a domicile firm here to do that. In the new regime, let's use that word, are there any changes we should be aware of in the financial promotion sign-off that fund managers should be taken into account?
I think that the financial promotion approval itself is a concept that doesn't exist in Europe, right? I don't even think it exists in the US, because basically when it comes at all the marketing materials in Europe, it's like, there are very few regulators who want to receive it beforehand, but otherwise it's like, it remains as a responsibility of the fund manager or promoter. You're right. In the UK, you need a firm that is authorized to approve your financial promotions, and you need to name this firm at the time of
Oh, your disclaimer and your documents, yeah.
But also when you do the application under the overseas fund regime, there is an entry whereby they will ask for the details of this entity, and I think that basically this will be a challenge for everyone who has more experience in continental Europe and less experience in the UK, because, as I said, culturally there is quite a gap to bridge on this one. But anybody who has a UK entity within their group would be better placed to deal with this requirement.
Okay, let's talk about a couple more things here. One of which is a subject which I find, as someone from the UK, I find slightly old-fashioned, and that's the UK facilities agent. When I talk about it to US managers or Asian managers who are coming into the UK, they find it quite strange. I talk about paying agents, which is obviously a more of a common phrase that people use. What do you know much about the history of the facilities agent, and or more importantly, what does it mean going forward under the new regime?
Yeah, that's interesting. So the idea was for all the managers that are not physically with a presence in the UK, they have to provide an address where an investor could walk in and ask a copy of a document or information on the fund prices, how to make a complaint. And so it's an interesting one, because the chances of anybody walking into a physical premise to ask this information are slimming.
Zero. It never happens.
Slimming. And so the reality is, do you still need this UK address? The new regime says that you do, but opens up to the possibility that these facilities, if they are free of charge, if they're offered in English, can be also offered through an electronic medium. Now, in all fairness, I still think that for the time being, it's better if you have a UK address, if for no other reason than having to be able to justify that you have communicated to all your investors that the communication will be electronic going forward, right? Yeah. This is something that you have to insert in your prospectus as well. Sometimes, and this is what the regulation says as well, an investor should be able to place an order through the facilities agent as well. Again, and I don't know what's your experience. I don't think that this
happen.
But for anyone who wants to, whoever has to deal with something like that, it's like, that's borderline with, arranging deals. And so it's like, there are certain limits for a facilities agent to remain a facilities agent without overstepping into regulated activity.
Yeah, we operate that on behalf of the GemCap fund range, but also independent managers. So if any fund manager wants to use us, please get in touch. But thank you for that. Just in our final minutes here, I just want to deal with a situation which is really critical to everybody, which is investor redress. And when things go wrong with fund managers, which rarely happen, but when they do go wrong, they can be quite spectacular. And we had Woodford and others in recent years here in the UK. Is there anything in the documentation coming from the FCA today which deals with investor redress that we should, as fund managers, should be aware of?
Yes, so basically the investor redress that is offered by UK funds is clearly superior than the one that is offered by European funds, right? And that is the ombudsman, which is this public entity that takes another go to an investor complaint when the first complaint made to the manager isn't really to the full satisfaction of a consumer. And then you have the financial service compensation scheme that basically is this governmental backstop when a manager cannot make good a claim that is made successfully against them, right? So none of this, with the exception probably of the ombudsman, which is something that you can hear as a keyword here and there in Europe, none of these two, let's say, remedies are on offer in Europe, right? And so you have to be able to disclose this to a different extent in your fund recommendation. So the prospectus should say, for instance, what are you offering instead? Is there an alternative dispute resolution mechanism? Can you make a complaint in English? Do you have to pay if you want to make a complaint? It's like, you know, if there is a decision, is it binding? Is it limited or capped to a certain amount? Those are the things that you should disclose. And then as you go down in your point of sale documents, like the kids, you should say that there is no UK redress available, and maybe link to somewhere else on a website where you describe what's available. And even as to a smaller extent into the financial promotions, because it's like, you know, financial promotions are too brief to contain a huge explanation of what you can offer, really.
Let me put you on the spot then. Do you think that we will see a European-wide compensation scheme come into play? Because it is a question that's often raised by managers coming onto an offshore platform about compensation, because it's questioned by wealth managers here in the UK who say, well, there is no compensation scheme. What would you go bust? Do you see it happening?
Well, let me put it like this. Europe wants desperately more retail exposure to capital markets. And maybe that's the way, right?
Maybe. I think, well, we often say that the course of action is that you address it to the fund's board and the fund manager themselves, and you sue them. They're corporate entities. And that is possible when we said the redress is against the directors, which is why they all have huge numbers of values of PI. Let's bring this to a close. Thank you so much, Attilio. Can I recommend people get in touch with Attilio Veneziano? His Venezia & Partners is a great business when it comes to compliance and understanding the offshore funds market, but in any market. So it leaves me to say a big thank you to you today, and we look forward to catching up in the near future. All the very best.
Thank you, Stuart.